affect country. Before we move to the content of this session, I would also like to introduce Lucie Laferty, who will co-facilitate this session with me. Lucie?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lucy, and I'm the Health and Nutrition Surge Manager on the ERNE PCU. And just to let you know, I've just clicked the record button, so we will be recording this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. And I am, as I say, my name is Diane Moyer. I am the Nutrition Advisor of Concern Worldwide for Francophone country. So as you can see, there's no translation, there's no translator for this session, but luckily both Lucy and I speak both French and English, so we will try to translate some of the content, not everything, unfortunately, but we will try to do our best to translate the key element and the discussion. So don't hesitate to ask questions in English and French. Rapidement, pour les francophones, donc nous n'avons pas de traducteur pour présenter cette session. Les sessions, les case studies notamment seront en anglais. Par contre, nous essaierons autant que possible de traduire, de parler en français pour tout ce qui est les points essentiels et notamment la session de discussion. Lucie et moi parlons parfaitement français, donc n'hésitez pas à poser vos questions dans la chat box. Just also a few reminders, so we can all do it well. Keep yourself mute, and unless you want to speak, raise your hand before speaking, and you can unmute, so we just don't talk over each other. And don't hesitate to use the chat box, either to introduce yourself or to ask any question as we go. Les règles habituelles, restez avec un muet, levez la main avant de parler, on vous donnera la parole et n'hésitez pas à poser les questions dans la chat box. Next slide.
Maybe just one small thing, Diane. If participants do note that their name is Gillian McCarthy, it would be really helpful to us if you could change your name to your real name, just so we know who's in the group with us. So to do that, if you just click on the 3 small dots to the right of your name, you should be able to rename yourself.
Donc, comme l'a dit Lucie, j'avais oublié de le préciser, certains d'entre vous se sont enregistrés, enfin se sont logués en tant que Gillian. Vous devez avoir 3 petits points au-dessus de votre écran, vous devez cliquer dessus pour pouvoir vous renommer, qu'on puisse savoir qui vous êtes. Moving to the content of this session. So this session will last about 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we have quite a packed session. We'll start with the introduction right now. Then followed by a presentation from Lucie on the key point learning from ERNE on supplies. What are the main challenges, what we have learned so far. We will try to illustrate these challenges by 2 case studies, one from Sudan, presented by Haman, followed by 1 case study from Ethiopia, presented by Gashane. This will be followed by a 10-minute Q&A session, which will be followed then by 30-minute discussion, during which we aim to reach our objective, which is to agree on some recommendation and more specifically agree on how we want to reach this recommendation. So without transition, Lucy, it's for you to start.
Thanks, Merci. Diane. So as Diane said, to kick off our session, what we're going to do is just share some of the key points that have come out through the ERNE programme and that will hopefully help us to have a really rich discussion when we do get to that part of the session. So firstly, I think one of the points that came out during the implementation of the programme was clearly that the nutrition supply chains in the countries that we were working in did remain fragmented and were at times unreliable. And we'll hear from our colleagues in a minute that there were pipeline breaks in Sudan and in Somali region of Ethiopia, which resulted in stockouts at a district or warda level for around 6 months in 2022. When it comes to the delivery mechanisms, we noted that, as most of this group I'm sure knows very well, that there were different processes that were being used, but we felt this was important to re-highlight at the beginning of the session so that we can consider this when we are thinking of recommendations for the way forward. So as you know, RUTF is increasingly being delivered directly to government authorities at district health level, which is then managed onwards for delivery to health facilities. And this was the case in our programme areas in Ethiopia, Niger, and in Sudan. While in DRC and in South Sudan, UNICEF distributed the RUTF directly to Concern, who then distributed to the health facilities. While RUSF was largely distributed via FLA, so our field level agreements between WFP and the partner NGOs, so that was in certain cases concern, or the local NGO partners who we were implementing with. This was the case in all of our ERNE countries, but as Kate mentioned in her PowerPoint presentation, the exception of Niger, where we were not involved in this process, and equally in 2 program waradas in Ethiopia. The distribution of nutrition supplies via the Ministry of Health supply chains is, we think, the ideal scenario. And we can see that there has been significant progress made on this over the last number of years. But one of the challenges that came out was that often the district health offices lacked resources to be able to support the last mile delivery, notably in terms of sufficient staff and transport capacity to ensure that the supplies arrived on time and in sufficient quantities. So 2 of the points that we hope to discuss in a little bit more detail later on, and we'll see through the case presentations, is the need for improved monitoring and coordination. And so a more standardized approach perhaps to monitoring nutrition supply, stock levels and forecasting needs at health facility levels that is coordinated across the Ministry of Health, NGOs and UN agencies might perhaps be an important first step to ensure that supplies do arrive on time. There was also perhaps a need to establish clear roles and responsibilities between the different stakeholders to ensure that there was a coordinated effort and that roles were not being duplicated, but that equally everybody knew where their support could be best used. So I will pass over to my colleagues who are going to really just present some of this information in a very practical way based on the learning that they have had from managing the ERNE program in Sudan and Ethiopia. So first we're going to have Haman Abbasi, who's the ERNE program manager in Sudan, and this will be followed by Gashane Wuldi, who's the ERNE program coordinator in Ethiopia. And so as Diane was saying, we really would encourage you to put any questions into the chat box, and we'll have a few minutes for Q&A after the 2 presentations before we move on to this discussion. So over to you, Haman, and just let me know when you want me to move slide.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. Yeah, good morning. I'm Haman Adama, the ERNE program manager for Sudan. So really happy to share with you the Sudan experience about the managing nutrition supply. So the presentation is divided into 4 parts. Firstly, we will show you the background of nutrition supply during the implementation of ERNE program. Then we will share with you some challenge encountered during the implementation of the program, and then also sharing some learning we get. And lastly, we will share some thinking about recommendation and how we will manage the current crisis in Sudan. So next slide, please. Yeah, about the nutrition supply arrangement in Sudan, the ERNE program were implemented in 15 health facilities across 8 localities in both West and South Kordofan state. So for the management of severe acute malnutrition, the RUHF and therapeutic milk were donated from UNICEF, which delivered to state level of Ministry of Health, and then the Ministry of Health organized the transport to locality level. So concern also during the implementation of the program, support the SMOS to deliver to health facility. For the management of moderate acute malnutrition, RUSF are provided through World Food Program to NGO directly through field level agreement. And during the ERNE program implementation, 3 field level agreements were signed between Concern and the World Food Program. Just clarification, during the first year of the program in 2020, the FLA were signed between World Food Program and Marif, who were the national NGO partner of Concern worldwide. Next slide, please. So as challenge encountered during the implementation of the program during the past 3 years, the main challenge was the stock out of RUSF pipeline. So we remained 3 main periods of stock out. The first was the period of January to March 2021. This was with the Hello? Yeah, this was due to the delay in the execution of the FLA, and the second period of stock out was January to June 2022, also related to the non-availability of supply at the World Food Program level. And then also recently from the period of October 2022 up to today, there is no funding at the World Food Program, so there is no FLA ongoing. Another challenge that we encountered were the limited capacity of SMOH to transport RUHF from state level to health facility. Another one also is about the weak forecasting and communication of need from health facility to state level. And also the last one linked to the second, were the weak monitoring and reporting of monthly stock against case load at health facility level. So as concerned, our role was to support in management of RUHF, but during the implementation, this role was not formalized, meaning our support has often reactive rather than strategically planned. Next, please. Now, as a key learning that we find during the implementation of the ERNE program, first, we experiment that through the donation of tuk-tuk. Tuk-tuk are the tricycle motorbike that we provide to each locality we support. So we donate 8 tuk-tuk to each locality. And these tuk-tuk have showed their help to the transport of supply. And what we see also is these tricycles are cheaper than cars, and they are using less fuel as needed. And also the tuk-tuk are used for another activity like outreach activity, supervision visit. So what we are thinking for the future is to see how to make available tuk-tuk again now at the health facility level. And this will help health facility to manage very well again their need and how they can go and transport directly the RUHF or the RUSF from the locality level or to state level. And the second learning that we get on the implementation of the ERNE was the tracking monthly acute malnutrition admission against seasonal calendar using the search approach has helped us to identify peak period and prepositioning of the stock in the health facility level. So yeah, these are the two learning. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, in terms of recommendation on how to manage the current crisis in Sudan, at the level of national level, so the federal level, during the starting of the conflict, we see that the stock of RUHF and the RUSF pipeline were destroyed, and now they need to be restored. So we are thinking how to do this in this active conflict, and also how to manage the coming period of July to October that we know will be the peak caseload period, and with the current crisis will be potentially catastrophic. So also related to the challenge that we encountered, some recommendation that we are thinking. First, about the transport, we are thinking how to explore alternative transport option for last mile delivery to health facility. So our experience were on the tuk-tuk. Now we are thinking also to use some available means at the locality level like donkey, or also thinking about more innovative options like solar powered vehicle. So yeah, that are related to the transport. And then about the communication and forecasting of the requesting of the nutrition supply, we are thinking to strengthen the regular review and communication of stock and caseload at health facility level. So we are suggesting to formalize the system across all the partner by putting a systematic review meeting at every month, and just to sharing and discussing the need of nutrition, and also discussing the key achievement. Also, we are thinking to clarify and better formalize role and responsibility for RUHF management at the state level between MOH, UNICEF, and supporting NGO. And lastly, also about the RUSF challenge, we are thinking how to make advocacy at the level of World Food Program to see how to revise the supply system by FLA by putting the organization of need and the management of RUSF at the level of the MOH. So this with the objective to align the management and responsibility with the UNICEF system for the RUHF. So thank you very much. And now over to my colleague from Gashani.
Thanks, Amma. I'm Gashana. I'm the ERNE program coordinator from for Ethiopia program, and I will take you through the main challenges on supply chain management in Ethiopia throughout the ERNE program implementation period. Next slide, Lucy. Yeah, so my presentation will have a content on how nutrition supplies are being managed in Ethiopia, and what was the extent of nutrition supply breakage in the ERNE, specifically in the ERNE program locations, and what were the major contributing factors for this supply breakage. And lastly, I will have a recommendation just to open a space for our discussion later on. Next slide. So just to give you a brief highlight on nutrition supply management as a country, UNICEF is the sole supplying agency for RUTF, F100 and F75. Those are nutrition commodities used to manage malnutrition, severe acute malnutrition at outpatient therapeutic program and at stabilization center. So UNICEF is delivering the food directly at the zonal level. In our country, there are 5 administrative layers: the federal level, regional level, zonal level, Woreda, and the lowest administrative level, Kabale. So UNICEF is directly transporting the supply to the zonal level, and then Woredas will be responsible to transport these nutrition supplies to health facility level. But for targeted supplementary feeding program commodities like RUSF and CCB++, WFP is directly supplying the commodities either to implementing partners or NGOs and to the government or disaster risk management office. So there are some, in our country, TCFP is not totally integrated into the primary health care system, unlike the outpatient therapeutic program and stabilization centers. But some of the Woredas are piloting to integrate this TCFP into the routine primary health care system. So specifically for those Woredas, WFP is directly supplying to the government. But for Woredas which are implementing TCFP through NGOs, WFP is directly giving the product to the respective NGO warehouses at Woreda level. Next slide. So just this essential nutrition supply stockout was one of the biggest challenge encountered throughout the ERNE project lifespan. And only in 2022, there was a region-wide shortage of TCFP products, specifically in Somali for up to 6 consecutive months and for up to 5 consecutive months in Amhara. Even if the extent of the problem is huge for TCFP products, there is also RUTF or ready-to-use therapeutic food supply interruptions. So at different different times across the 2 regions. So you can see how much the extent of the food supply breakout is huge. Next slide. So when it comes to the major contributing factors for this supply breakage, on top of the list, poor planning and forecasting of needs is one of the biggest challenge. In some of the locations, there is an under-planning of resources, and in some of the other locations, there is sometimes overestimating of the need. So it leads to shifting the product into the areas where there is a small number of case loads. So there is a poor planning and forecasting of need. The second one is there is also procurement delay and inflation, especially this RUTF F100, F75. Most of the time they are being imported from abroad. So there will be a delay in the supply chain, and the inflation have also affected the supply chain system hugely. And there is overstretched government transportation system. Even if there is enough supply at zonal warehouse or regional warehouse, sometimes because of lack of transportation to the final service delivery point, we frequently face a challenge of stock out at the facility. And lack of proper storage at various stages of the supply chain. This is also one of the contributing factor for the breakage. Next slide. The other contributing factor is life-saving nutrition product promotion and selling via social media. As you see on the picture, we take this from social media from Facebook. It was being circulated. They put even the cost of the plant net, and they are advocating that if there is anyone who will procure these products in bulk, they are showing that there will be a discount. And so this indicates that either there is a leakage from the supply chain, or beneficiaries are not using the supply for intended purpose. They might have been selling it on the market. And so general leakage, as this is also as evidenced by UNICEF RTF leakage assessment and on spot checking at the Worada and Kabale level, general leakage also is one of the contributing factor for this supply chain breakage. Next slide. So as a recommendation, we need to strengthen the communication mechanism down from the Kabale up to the federal level. And as an example, UNICEF have installed a hotline, which is started in 2023 to report stockouts. And we also strongly recommend to incorporate RUTF in the essential drug list of the country. Is not so far incorporated into this essential drug list. So incorporating this into the essential drug list will have so many enormous importance in terms of strengthening the regulation. So this is one of the recommendations, and increasing the local production of RUTF. As I mentioned before, there is a delay in importing the products, as well as it has also cost implication. There is one local factory in the country which is producing RUTF as well as RUSF, but the capacity of that factory is not sufficient enough to cover the need. So it's highly recommended to stimulate the market within the country so that it can shorten the delivery time, as well as it can save huge amount of money. Next slide. So the other recommendation is to have more standardized RUTF stock monitoring system at the health facilities across the Ministry of Health, UNICEF, and supporting NGOs. There is no such a strong monitoring system within the country, and it's also recommended to conduct a regular joint market monitoring to see how the leakage is affecting the supply chain. So in the presence of Regional Health Bureau, as well as Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Supply Agency. And strong law enforcement is needed to minimize the supply breakage. Next slide. Yeah, thank you very much. This is my presentation. Over to you. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Gashani and Aman, for this very interesting presentation. So what we have learned so far is you are both experiences non-negligible shortage of either IUTF, IUSF, or both for different reasons. Like in Sudan, we see there was an issue with transport, with lack of supplies, lack of monitoring, lack of coordination. In Ethiopia, there was an issue also linked with, again, lack of monitoring and planning and leakage. And your recommendation are not exactly the same, like goes from exploring alternative transport, advocating for better supplies, or a new way of working with a supplier, either as a donor or as a initial supplier, looking also at strengthening communication, which I think is one of the key elements, communication and coordination. So if it's okay, I've seen a few question in the chat box. As we will move after this session to the discussion session, issue and recommendation linked to monitoring and transport, I suggest we put on the side all the questions linked to transport and monitoring, and we will try first to address other questions. So, Cornel, I've seen your question. So there's a question, Pamela, is a question for Aman or for Gashene about procuring any supplies from other donor or only getting from UNICEF and MOH and WFP. Are you asking Gashene or Aman? You can unmute yourself, Pamela.
Yeah, I'm asking Gashene. I'm asking from Gashene, please.
Yeah, if I get the question properly, so RUSF is being directly donated, either RUSF or RUTF, all the nutrition commodities are directly being donated by UNICEF and WFP directly to government and implementing partners.
And is this enough? Actually, the question was, is this enough or do you have gaps?
Yeah, there is really a gap. Is the supply being provided by these donors is not sufficient. That is the reason why there was a frequent interruption of supplies at the service delivery service point. So it's not enough, but as I mentioned, there might be different contributing factor for that shortage.
Yeah, and then the final, it was, I asked actually one question with many questions. Then the final question was, so how did you cope with the gap times, particularly for children who are already in the program and on treatment, and then you have these supply gaps? How did you cope?
Yeah, that is really an interesting question. So we have been trying to use a simplified approach whenever there is a gap, for example, on RUTF. We were asking on the coordination system to shift into the either RUSF, but we are not successful in this regard. So we were forced to discharge children without being cured from the program, and it has really contributed for poor recovery rate sometimes, and for defaulter. We have quite a lot of number of defaulters because of this supply breakage. So it was not well mitigated, and there was no mechanism to address these children when there is a shortage of supplies.
Yeah, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you, Gashane, for answering. Aman, you want to say something?
Yeah, just to share a complementary comment about the question raised by Pamela. So sharing the experience in GRC, where we, during the period of stock hour also, we managed to supply, to buy in directly with the concerned budget, the nutrition supply. And also during the period of gap, the adaptation that we find is the sensitive activity under the behavior change by reinforcing the home garden activity through providing more availability of food in households level, and also increasing also the cooking demonstration activity. So this kind of adaptation we use during the implementation of program in GRC. Yeah.
Thank you, Aman, for this addition. So Aman used to be the program manager of also a program in DRC. So he has both experience from Sudan and DRC. And it's true that in DRC, we tried to set up a non-product-based approach, trying to encourage better eating to cope with the shortage of IUSF. There was a question also on identifying needs. We saw that planning sometimes is one of the major challenges. For both Aman and Gashene, how did you identify the need? How do you calculate, how do you identify what was the right amount of IUTF and IUSF to ask for?
Thanks, Diane. For Ethiopian context, usually the procedure is we have a community level screening, which is being made by the health extension worker. So that figure will be used for planning purpose. So we will know the number of beneficiaries who are severely malnourished or moderately malnourished. So based on that figure, we will submit the request in a monthly basis. But the problem is there is a concern on the screening itself. Sometimes because of access issue, we are not going to screen in a regular basis, or there is a quality on the screening. So sometimes there is overestimating, and sometimes there is underestimating of the number of malnourished children. But the basis for this estimation is mainly on using the monthly screening data. But now, because of this challenge, WFP and UNICEF are now shifting their modality to use the proxy GAM rate and the number of population per warada, rather than relying totally on the number of screened children. But it has also its own problem. Just to estimate the GAM rate for the waradas is just a proxy data. It doesn't reflect the real situation at the warada level. So there is still a dilemma on estimating the number of beneficiaries. This is also really contributing for the supply breakage at different times. Thanks.
Thank you, Gashane. Aman, do you want to add on what Gashane says, sharing your experience from either DRC or Sudan?
So in addition to what Gashane said, for the continuity need, the system that we are using in Sudan and also in DRC is based on the number of children admitted at the program. So we are supplying also in a quarterly base for every 3 months. We are forecasting based on the admission and also with the picture that we share in the presentation based on the seasonal need or calendar. We are also forecasting the need based on all these prevision, and we are supplying health facility on the quarterly base.
Thank you, Aman. Amadou?
Oui, bonjour à tout le groupe. Donc, moi, je suis Amadou Alzouma, je suis programme officer pour ECHO au Niger. J'ai écouté avec attention les interventions des collègues de l'Éthiopie et du Soudan sur l'estimation du nombre d'enfants dans le besoin en termes de prise en charge et les intrants nécessaires. Effectivement, dans les formations sanitaires au Niger aussi, cette estimation est faite sur le même modèle de l'Éthiopie et du Soudan. Mais la limite de ces estimations, c'est que aujourd'hui, notre discussion, c'est vraiment dans les contextes fragiles. Et donc, dans les zones affectées par les conflits, il y a beaucoup de mouvements de population qui se font avec une cible additionnelle qui vient souvent d'autres régions où les gens ont été obligés de se déplacer pour venir dans de nouvelles zones d'accueil et souvent même des pays voisins et qui ne sont pas pris en compte dans le cadre de ces estimations-là. Donc, ce serait bien de ne pas se baser seulement sur la prévalence nutritionnelle de la zone, mais il faudrait aussi, dans l'estimation des intrants, prévoir aussi d'autres contingences. Donc, je pense que si pour pouvoir avoir une estimation assez réelle des intrants, il faudra prendre en compte un peu toutes ces considérations-là. Donc, ça, c'est un aspect. Maintenant, je ne sais pas, ce que j'ai cru comprendre, c'est qu'il y a des discussions qui vont se faire sur la chaîne d'approvisionnement et peut-être les difficultés au niveau des formations sanitaires. Peut-être que je peux réserver mes autres interventions au niveau de ces discussions-là, parce que j'ai aussi beaucoup à dire par rapport à la chaîne d'approvisionnement, par rapport aux nouvelles façons de faire pour pouvoir éviter de tomber dans des ruptures d'intrants au niveau des districts sanitaires. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Amadou, pour votre intervention. Lucy has been, so Amadou from ECHO has just made an intervention of the challenge linked to displaced population, adding on the caseload and enforce the difficulty to estimate the right amount of plum peanut or plum PSUP. So, and Lucy has been translating what he said in the chat box. So if it's okay with everyone, I suggest we move to the discussion. I took note of the points that were in the meeting chat and we will try to address them. So as we move forward, Lucy, slide. So what we want to discuss now is how we can strengthen nutrition supply chain to avoid this pipeline break. So obviously, this is a long debate. It could take 5 full days just to address every single issue, looking at the whole supply chain. So we really want to focus on 2 aspects. The first one being monitoring, and the second one being transport, as was highlighted by Kate previously. So if you look at transport, there was a few initiatives proposed by Aman and Gashene. There was also some comment in the chat box. What do you think should be your recommendation when it comes to transport? Like what new initiative, new way we should propose to address the issue with transport? Donc, rapidement en français, nous passons maintenant à la session de discussion. Donc, nous savons que la chaîne d'approvisionnement est extrêmement complexe. Ça pourrait prendre 5 jours entiers pour en parler. On va se concentrer surtout sur tout ce qui est transport et le suivi et évaluation qui ont été des points importants mentionnés par nos collègues. Donc, selon vous, quelles pourraient être les recommandations qu'on pourrait faire pour améliorer le transport des entrants jusqu'au centre de santé? Donc, vous pouvez intervenir en français ou en anglais. So don't hesitate, raise your hand or write in the chat box. Conel, maybe we want to start with you, since you were the first one to make a comment on solar power vehicle. Do you think it's, were you responding to Aman's suggestion, or?
I was responding to Aman's suggestion, exactly. I suppose, you know, we've been talking about sustainability and looking at reducing carbon emissions as well, and we're looking at fleets and how do we be realistic in these contexts. We're not unlikely to have electric vehicles, so our solar vehicles, I just haven't heard of good solar powered vehicles that can have the level of torque that would be required in these kinds of contexts. So I'm just interested to hear. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks, Conel. Aman, do you want to respond to Conel on your suggestion of solar vehicle or solar power vehicle? What did you have in mind?
Yeah, Jan, I don't have any specific example to share about it, but yeah, just sharing this proposition that we get in a working group, yeah, as adaptation, because for a context of Sahelian like Sudan, where the main issue at the health facility level is how to get money and supply the need of what we call it, the fuel. If we have an alternative, the solar are available as it's the Sahel. We are thinking, yeah, it's more adapted and yeah, can solve also the issue of the management of or maintenance of the classic means of transport using the fuel. So yeah, that is just a thinking, and yeah, I believe also as is the Sahelian region is more adapted. Yeah.
And I think you also answer a question from Nigel asking if anyone has any experience in using private companies. So you say that, like, for example, in DRC, you had contract with Moto Taxi. Can you tell us a bit more about it, Aman?
Yeah, also about this experience, the location where we implemented ERNE in DRC were very in French enclave. So we are adapt ourselves by contracting the young motor taxi available in the community and taking all their information and making confidence with them. And every month we are requesting them so to go and supply the health facility that are in need of RUHF or RUSF. So that was another adaptation we use in this context. Yeah.
Thank you, Aman, for sharing this experience. I know also about separate experience of, for example, using donkey in Ethiopia or using this flatboat in Mali to go to the place that are geographically remote. Anyone in this group has any experience?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't see who's speaking. Amadou?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Je pense que sur la question de l'approvisionnement des intrants, du niveau des districts sanitaires jusqu'au niveau des centres de santé, je crois que j'ai vu beaucoup d'expériences positives qui ont été mises dans la présentation de l'Éthiopie et du Soudan sur des stratégies communautaires. Je crois qu'il y a un aspect qui est assez important. Tout le monde sait que les centres de santé font face à d'énormes difficultés en termes de ressources financières, mais aussi en termes de moyens. Donc, si on laisse les districts sanitaires à eux-mêmes, ils ne seront jamais en mesure d'assurer de manière régulière dans les délais les intrants au niveau des formations sanitaires. C'est pourquoi il faut mettre à contribution les collectivités territoriales et les communautés dans le cadre de ces transports d'intrants. Sur les budgets des collectivités territoriales, ce sur lequel les partenaires ont essayé de travailler ici au Niger, c'est que chaque commune a un budget santé dans son plan de développement communautaire et dans son plan annuel d'action. Donc, c'est de voir comment ce budget santé peut être en partie mobilisé pour pouvoir contribuer à l'acheminement des intrants. Donc, ce qui fait que ça responsabilise la commune dans le cadre du transport des intrants. Et au Niger, on a eu beaucoup de succès positifs où les communes se sont bien mobilisées pour pouvoir apporter des moyens logistiques au niveau des districts sanitaires pour pouvoir assurer le transport des intrants. Il y a aussi au niveau communautaire des contributions qui ont été faites grâce à la mobilisation de la diaspora pour que des ressortissants de la zone qui vivent à l'étranger et qui ont accès à certaines ressources puissent transférer une partie de leurs ressources qui serviront dans la santé et notamment dans les questions de transport d'intrants du district sanitaire jusqu'aux formations. Le Niger a connu aussi une expérience qui a été mise en œuvre par UNICEF sur l'acheminement jusqu'au dernier kilomètre des intrants à travers des transporteurs privés, où UNICEF a signé des contrats avec des transporteurs privés pour cibler un certain nombre de districts qui sont extrêmement vulnérables par rapport à la malnutrition. Donc, dans 2 régions, cette expérience a été mise en œuvre dans la région de Zender et dans la région de Maradi, qui sont les régions de haute prévalence nutritionnelle, pour contracter avec des transporteurs pour assurer le transport du niveau central jusqu'au niveau du dernier kilomètre. Donc, cette expérience aussi a permis d'améliorer l'approvisionnement en intrants jusqu'au dernier kilomètre. C'est ce que je voudrais dire. Je ne voulais pas trop monopoliser la parole, mais je laisserai aussi des autres contribuer. Merci.
Merci beaucoup Amadou pour ces interventions qui sont effectivement très importantes et la mention de l'aspect financier au-delà de l'aspect logistique, de savoir quel véhicule on doit choisir, il y a aussi tout l'aspect financier qui est important. So again, a very great intervention from Amadou from ECHO. I think Lucy has translated everything, but just highlighting the bottleneck linked to finance. That's having a motorbike is great, but if you don't have the money to pay for the fuel to pay in the motorbike, but that's useless. So it's very important to find alternative way of funding this fuel, to funding this transport. I think there was looking at alternative way of funding. One point that was mentioned by Lucy, Ganesh, Gashene, and Aman and even Kate is the role and responsibility of NGO, UN, donor, and MOH, and how we all coordinate in to fix this issue. So, what do you think should be the role of NGO? Do you think it's up to NGO to fund this financial gap? Should it be NGO to pay for the fuel for the motorbike, etc.? Or what do you think? What additional role or responsibility could NGO have in supporting transport for supplies? Aman?
Yeah, what I'm thinking about this, in emergency context, NGO have to take the responsibility and try to be the first line of provision of nutrition supplied in health facility. Now we have also to think about the sustainability when we are in the normal, or I don't know, in alert context, and yeah, try to have a strong linkage between the system in place of MOH, because NGO will not stay all the time, and try to more responsibilize them, or also why not thinking to use the community, as we have the experience on the ERNE, the setting of a Sentinel committee just to follow all the issue about the nutrition or food security and indicator or this kind of things. And now how I'm thinking we can make all this linkage together and just try to follow if the period is emergency, the NGO supporting have to be the more responsible just to avoid any break or stock out. And now if the situation is more comfortable, we have to hand over to the availability to people in place. So yeah, just making this kind of linkage. Yeah.
Thank you, Aman. So it's quite an interesting point from Aman, stating that yes, NGO should support with financing transport, but this support should not be blind. We should limit our support to emergency, and that's why the surge approach is really great, because it can help you to identify when the health facility are not able anymore to support, when they are really facing an emergency. There is a question of sustainability, also looking at advocacy, as was said by our colleague from ECHO, looking at opportunity of funding by the community. So again, yes, for support, but no blind support. Look at sustainability, looking at handing over the responsibility of managing transport to the MOH and the community. Anyone else that wants to add on this, either on this finance, or maybe on another suggestion on transport, how to improve transport, and what do you think should be the role of NGO? Gashane?
Yeah, from my point of view, we need to still think of in bold about the sustainability issue. You know, in Ethiopia, NGOs are supporting the transportation system in ad hoc basis, where there is no sustainability at all. So what I would suggest is, one thing we need to advocate for the government itself to have to allocate sufficient budget for the transportation. And we know it's a problem. The government budget is already overstretched. So there should be a means to support the system itself, rather than supporting the transportation in ad hoc basis. There is one good point that we need to engage also diasporas. So we need to bring all the supports, either from the donors or from the diasporas. We need to bring this support into one pipeline, and to help the government system itself to be strengthened in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Gashane. So once again, looking at advocacy, sustainability, building the local capacity of self-funding, so they are not becoming too reliable or too dependent on NGO. Just looking back at Connell's initial question on going engine versus nature. So do you think we should go back to maybe, I don't know if we can call it old-fashioned way of transporting using boat, donkey, camels, etc. Or do you think we should all move to motor-based vehicle, motorbike, motor taxi, trucks, etc.? Any opinion in the group? I would be curious to know what you are using in your own program, donkey or motorbike, and what would be your opinion on this? Amal, Mohammed, go ahead.
Thank you, Rihanna. I think the context we are working should also have a consideration in this, because now we are working in Ethiopia, especially in Somali region, where we have been experiencing the drought for the last 3 years. Like if we go back to the old fashioned, which means like having donkeys or camels, the sustainability of those livestock also needs water and grass to survive in those areas. And in certain areas, you cannot be even using a motorbike because that will also need fuel, and there's no fuel in certain areas where we work. So I think it's the nature challenge to work on those areas, and going back to the old fashioned will not help us in this, but what will help us is like thinking about the future. Like what do we have, what innovations do we have from the future? Can we use alternative things? Now we are using pickup vehicles, we are renting trucks to deliver the supply to the beneficiaries, but that also has a cost implications. Can we afford the transportation and also the fuel with the current inflation?
Thank you, Aman, for this intervention. So I think you raised two very important points, which is there's no one size fits all. What can work in Ethiopia might not work in Niger, and even within Ethiopia, you have, as you say, different contexts. Somaliland might be different from Highland. So you really need to know your context and to adapt. And then henceforth, you need this program agility that allow you to adapt. I guess there's also this question of seasonality. Maybe when it's rainy season, you won't be able to use classic transport. We'll have to find alternatives. So again, you need to know your context. Amadou, c'est une anciennement ou vous voulez parler à nouveau?
En fait, je voudrais juste revenir un peu sur un point que vous avez mentionné sur quel est le rôle et les responsabilités des ONG dans le cadre du transport des intrants. Je pense que j'ai beaucoup entendu dans les réactions des gens l'appui dans le cadre de la sustainabilité à la chaîne nationale, sur des méthodes locales pour que quelque part on ait un système qui est beaucoup plus pérenne. Cela n'exclut pas pour autant que nous, en tant qu'acteurs humanitaires, nous avons quand même, dans les zones extrêmement fragiles, parce que c'est des zones assez vulnérables dans lesquelles nous travaillons, nous avons quand même une obligation d'assurer la qualité de l'accès aux soins pour les personnes vulnérables qui sont dans le besoin. Et dans ce cadre-là, chaque jour, nos équipes visitent les centres de santé. Ils font des supervisions régulières dans les centres de santé. Donc, essayons de profiter de ces contacts qu'ils ont avec les centres de santé pour pouvoir voir comment on peut appuyer à l'acheminement des intrants. Quand il y a une équipe de l'ONG qui va rencontrer les districts sanitaires, qu'il en profite pour pouvoir s'informer, est-ce qu'il y a des intrants qui doivent être apportés au niveau des formations sanitaires où il est en appui. Comme ça, il assure quand même le transport de ces intrants. Donc oui, pour la durabilité, continuer à renforcer la durabilité, mais cela n'exclut pas aussi notre mandat que nous avons aussi de nous assurer quand nous sommes présents que tout fonctionne bien. Nous, ce que nous avons fait cette année en tant que bailleur dans le cadre de la contractualisation, le Niger a connu aussi en 2022 des expériences de rupture d'intrants, comme ça s'est observé dans les autres pays. Mais ce que nous avons fait, c'est qu'on a déjà discuté avec UNICEF pour voir dans le cadre des financements que nous donnons, si ces financements-là peuvent être orientés dans les zones extrêmement, les intrants qui sont achetés sur la base de nos financements, soient orientés dans les zones extrêmement fragiles. Et on a eu ce point d'accord avec UNICEF. Et de l'autre côté, nous ne nous sommes pas arrêtés seulement à ça. Nous avons essayé de discuter avec les ONG qui interviennent dans le cadre des mécanismes de réponse rapide RRM pour voir si ces ONG santé et nutrition peuvent avoir quand même accès à un buffer stock qui leur permettra, si il y a des ruptures éventuelles, de pouvoir prendre dans leur buffer stock pour assurer quand même que dans le cadre de leurs opérations, de leurs appuis au niveau des centres de santé, qu'il y ait des intrants disponibles, quitte à ce que ce buffer stock soit remplacé par l'approvisionnement au niveau de la chaîne nationale. Donc, voilà un peu quelques expériences que je voudrais partager avec vous. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Amadou, et merci aussi de parler en français, ce qui permet à nos collègues francophones ici de pouvoir aussi bien participer. Before we move to the next topic, I would like to end with a question. Aileen, you raised a few interesting questions. I would like to highlight the one where you're saying, I don't know if it's considered a bold affirmation, that you think like maybe NGO should leave the transport. They should let the private sector manage the transport. That should not be one of our responsibility. Can you tell us more about this? Aileen?
Sorry, I think you're talking about me. I'm just wondering about the conversations we had last week on localization. And while there are many parts to this intervention, the actual supply of the goods from A to B, I'm just wondering if that's efficient and effective given our localization conversation.
I raise the question to the group. Has anyone any opinion on Aileen? Connell?
Yeah, I mean, it's the old question. I mean, of course, provision of supplies should be either government or the market. But when the market doesn't provide for the poorest, then obviously NGOs have to step in. So you're back into that whole typical circular argument. Ideally, you'd have a good demand and supply model there that the private sector would actually, service. But when it doesn't happen, we're forced into this situation. So I don't think there's any easy answer to it.
Diane.
Yeah.
Diane, sorry, my name is Catherine, and it's just a comment. When I worked in Sudan with Concern in 2016, we had regular stockouts. It's really interesting listening to the presentations where, over the last couple of years, this has not changed. And I was just wondering, and it always kind of bothered me when I was on the field, that we've two UN agencies, we've WFP and we've UNICEF, who are supplying and delivering nutrition supplies. But there doesn't seem to be any coordination or proper communication. And I was just wondering, should we not be going back to the drawing board in relation to how that's filtered right down? I don't think it's just the last minute delivery product, and I've been listening to the presentations today, and I was just thinking, it's the same problems that we're coming up against. And, it always amazed me that, we have these agencies, big agencies coming down to the field, or, and there didn't seem to be, communication and coordination. And I think if that was better organized at national level, to assist right down to the last minute delivery, because I think we're talking very local. And I think the problem is bigger than that. Do I make any sense? you know, yeah.
I know, I mean, you make total sense.
We have to advocate more, better. I think we have to advocate, you know, a little bit better, and with these big with the UN agencies to assist better. They just can't. I think you know, it has to be the MOH responsibility at the end of the day, because they are the responsibility. They have the responsibility for the health needs of the country, and of course we come in and we're assisting them. But I feel that listening to, I think it's a man that he was saying, the stockouts were quite incredible what he spoke about. He said from January to March 21, from January to June 22, from October to now in 23. So, you know, so what, you know, it's just not at local level. And, you know, they're doing their best. They're anticipating their needs. They're pre-planning, but there's still the problem. And I think it's literally going back to the drawing board and starting again.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with what you say, and I think this lack of coordination between these actors are a challenge. Colonel, I saw you raise your hand. If you allow me, I would like to ask someone from either UNICEF or WFP present in the room to respond. I do not wish, as you are the one being challenged, if I may say. Is there anyone from WFP or UNICEF who would like to say a word on this question?
If they're not there, Diana, I can talk to it.
Or maybe, I don't know, either they're not here, or maybe it's not a bashing, UN bashing, don't worry. No. It's just to discuss between ourselves on how we can work better together and which was responsibility. Gwen, tu veux y aller?
Thank you. I'm Gwenelle. I'm working for WFP. So since the beginning of the session, I quite hearing some complaint about WFP machinery. So great to be there. So I think in emergency setting, we need to think about the capacity of the government and what are they able to achieve when you have an emergency, when they are part of the conflict. How do you want them to be serving their population? So we need also to look at that, and the long-term strategy to strengthen their capacity is definitely needed, and we need to look at how to strengthen the capacity, but we also need to look at the financing of that, and on the long term, because you did not touch about that, but the financing of the health system and how to strengthen their capacity on the longer term, and then on specific surge, what are the role of the UN agency to support the supply chain when you have a health system that does not work and does not reach the last mile, how to contribute to that. So I think all systems are complementary. We can of course better coordinate. I know that in Kenya we are monitoring the stockouts at the health level, and it's a program that is managed by WFP for WFP and UNICEF product. So it's a joint initiative. So it's happening here and there. It's not everywhere, and it's true that we need to coordinate better maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen, for answering, for having the courage to speak and for answering this question. And I think you raise interesting points, the fact that is not one actor responsible for everything. Like, so you cannot thank only one actor, you cannot blame only one actor. I would like to just rebound on your comments on developing this joint monitoring and evaluation system. I wanted to discuss a bit about it, but unfortunately we're running out of time. But Gwen, can you talk a bit more about this joint monitoring and evaluation system? Because it has been raised by both Aman and Gashane at the bottlenecks, not knowing when the shortage are, and lack of communication between the different actors, the different level, health facility, district, etc. So can you just share a bit this experience?
Yeah, in Kenya, it's a real-time monitoring of the stock out, and it's through SMS that the health facility, the health worker can share the level of stock on real time. So at least it helps us to monitor the level of stock and to replenish accordingly to the demand. So and it's a joint initiative with UNICEF and WFP, and it's, I would say, and it's in collaboration with the government, because in Kenya the government is quite strong and in the management of malnutrition and quite present, and so it's an initiative that have been put in place during the last emergency response during the drought. So it's kind of simple because it's SMS, so it's not too complicated, and we don't need too much support on that. But at least it works, and it was I would say successful in Kenya.
Thank you very much, Gwen, for sharing this experience. So before we move to the conclusion, I would like to ask every one of you a question that was by Paul, who say, okay, for the last 20 years, there was a loss on investment on improving supply chain. Do you have the feeling, for the ones that have been in the field for a long time, that we are seeing some progress? We know we love talking about what's not working well, but do you have a feeling that there was some progress? La dernière question à tout le monde, qui a été posée par Paul, c'est de dire, il y a quand même, on se plaint beaucoup de toutes les difficultés. Ça fait 20 ans qu'on investit sur la chaîne de supply et le transport, enfin, en général. Est-ce que vous avez l'impression qu'il y a quand même eu des progrès ces dernières années? If you don't want to say anything, is it? I prefer to remain silent. Aman, go. You can go.
Bon, j'ai pas grande expérience en termes d'années pour faire de longues comparaisons, mais sur base de mes 7 ans d'expérience dans la mise en œuvre de programmes de prise en charge de la malnutrition, je vois quand même il y a beaucoup de progrès côté prise en charge de la malnutrition et du sévère. Pourquoi je dis cela? Parce que au niveau de l'UNICEF, il y a assez d'efforts, que ce soit pour mes expériences au Cameroun, en RDC et au Soudan, qui sont faits dans la disponibilisation de ces intrants nutritionnels. Ce dont on discute, c'est plus pour assurer maintenant un suivi et faire parvenir les intrants au niveau des bénéficiaires. Donc, personnellement, je trouve, pour conclure, ces 2 actions très importantes qui sont nécessaires à continuer à assurer. C'est plus au niveau des ressources humaines, en termes de personnes qui vont assurer le suivi. Peut-être la stratégie devrait commencer au niveau national et arriver au niveau terrain. Avoir des personnes qui sont là avec pour priorité de faire un suivi mensuel des besoins et assurer une continuité pour les personnes qui sont au niveau du terrain, qui sont en train d'exécuter. Avec cela, une bonne coordination, je pense que ça sera encore davantage parfait, quoi, parce que, voilà, la seconde chose, c'est le transport sur lequel on a largement discuté. Donc, ouais, la prise en charge de la malnutrition sévère, pour moi, je pense qu'il y a assez de qualité ou des efforts qui sont positifs. Là où on aimerait plus encore améliorer, c'est peut-être au niveau de la malnutrition aiguë modérée. Voilà, merci.
Okay, thank you, Aman, for your intervention. So highlighting that we are making some progress. We are to invest more on human resourcing, monitoring, capacity building. That unfortunately, the biggest challenge remains with the IOSF. Amadou, can I ask you to make a very short intervention because we have 5 minutes left before we need to move back to the big session and we need to wrap up. Amadou, à toi.
Oui, Diane, j'essaierai d'être le plus court que possible. D'accord. En fait, est-ce qu'il y a eu des progrès ces dernières années? Oui, je peux dire qu'il y a eu des progrès dans la chaîne d'approvisionnement ces dernières années au niveau de la disponibilité des intrants dans le pays et jusqu'au niveau des districts sanitaires. Donc, moi, j'ai aussi la chance de voir un peu le contrat régional RUTF avec UNICEF et surtout les pays qui sont couverts, les 4 ou 5 pays qui sont couverts par ce contrat régional. Seul le Niger a connu une rupture d'intrants au niveau des districts sanitaires. Et on connaît un peu pour le Niger la raison, parce que le Niger a eu des difficultés en 2022 avec l'unité de production des intrants, donc qui est l'usine de production, qui est la société de transformation alimentaire, qui est une usine qui a eu un certain nombre de soucis, qui ont fait en sorte que la production ne se faisait plus. Donc, c'est pour cela aussi qu'il y a eu ces ruptures au niveau des districts sanitaires, parce que UNICEF devrait commander à l'extérieur et transporter jusqu'au niveau des districts. Donc, oui, il y a eu des améliorations. C'est des améliorations qui restent très fragiles parce qu'on a vu, dès qu'il y a eu un souci avec l'unité de production au niveau national, on est retombé tout de suite dans les questions de rupture. Donc, peut-être que c'est ce que je voulais dire. Merci.
Thank you, Amadou. So Amadou was making a great conclusion. First, saying that yes, there was some progress, but this progress remains fragile. It's not because we have achieved no shortage for a long period of time that we will maintain, that we are also, in addition to everything we say before, we are also facing external issues, like for example, in Niger, when there was, due to protests, the production unit was destroyed, so which clearly impact ability to produce and distribute IUTF. So Lucy, if you can now share your table so we can see what everyone has said and we can agree on what we want to say to the rest of the group.
Thanks, Dan. If you just give me 1 second, I'm just putting it into the PowerPoint and hopefully we'll be able to see.
So what we tried to do is while we were speaking, Lucy took note of everything, which was quite a feast. And the idea will be to agree on what are the key recommendations, the key consideration we want to highlight, to bring to the group, and what should be a responsibility. We know that we won't be easy for everything. We won't be able to cover everything, but we just want to make sure we have a consensus on the main case. Lucy, do you want to present?
Yeah, can you see my screen at the moment, Diane?
Yeah, can you make full screen, please?
Yes, I can. And then if anyone has any additions, it's quite rough, we can change it.
Yeah, it's
slideshow from current slide up.
Yeah, next, perfect.
So I have tried with the help of Greta to summarize some of the key points that were coming out of the discussion. I think as Diane was summarizing there in the end, we see that there are some of the same problems, what progress, and I think we had some nice interventions there at the end that there has been progress made. However, as Amadou said, that the system is quite fragile. Do we need to go back to the drawing board, or is it rather just an improvement on some of the challenges that we are facing? So perhaps not in order of priority, but one of the first points that we discussed around transport was considering suitable transport modes that are flexible and suit the context. There was the traditional means, the current means, and perhaps future innovations, that there is probably no one size fits all, and that we really need to perhaps consider seasonality and the different terrains to ensure that there is something appropriate. We had some good reflections around the importance of financing. How do we account for inflation? How do we ensure that there are sustainable sources of financing? The importance of considering the community component, integration of budget lines in communal level planning, as was given an example in Niger, but also considering the diaspora. But even at a national level, to ensure that we advocate to the government to ensure that they include sufficient budget for transportation of supplies, and that the support from NGOs should be really focused on supporting this system itself, to avoid ad hoc support throughout the country, that we really need to make sure that we are supporting this single pipeline. There was also an intervention regarding the advocacy and advocating to the UN agencies, ensuring better coordination, and that this needs to be led from the National Ministry of Health. When we think of the roles and responsibilities, some of the key points I put here were, from an NGO perspective, it's perhaps really focusing on those emergency periods or those very fragile states, as Amadou was explaining to us, in some of the border regions in Niger. And then also considering the capacity of the government and having a longer term strategy to support the building of their capacity, as was mentioned by Gwen. Then we didn't really get a lot of time to talk on the monitoring side of things, but the points we put here were mainly in relation to that very nice example on the joint monitoring and evaluation system from Kenya, that having something that is really localized and at a health facility level can perhaps encourage more real-time monitoring, which is a simple tool that might be able to avoid stockouts. And then the last point on monitoring was the monitoring of caseloads, forecasting and consideration of seasonality. So yes, as Haman had mentioned, considering our seasonal and events calendar and ensuring that that is used when possible to when we are estimating supply needs. But also then I think what I probably should add to this is considering the wider context, so not just your seasonality and forecasting in that sense, but also displacement of populations, and perhaps a point on buffer stocks could be added there also. Diane, I hope that is somewhat clear. I don't know if anyone has any comments or feels that we should add any other key points to the slide that will be fed back in the plenary.
I think that's perfect. That's a lot of information. Keep in mind, we'll only have 5 minutes. Gashene, as you will be our appointed person, do you have any comment? And then anyone else is, if there's something you feel is being misrepresented, not properly written, or something we missed out, don't hesitate to speak now. You have 3 minutes left before we all go together to the big room.
No, Dan, it's clear. It's clearly mentioned. It's just in a way that we have been discussing, so it's clear.
Okay, that's great. Anyone else wants to weigh in, to add, to ask to remove? Pamela?
Yeah, I had mentioned somewhere in the comments that is there a possibility that international NGOs who have the opportunity to get access to donors to request for contingency supplies to help in times of gaps. This could be considered, I think.
Okay, thank you. Lucy, you are adding it? Okay, Nigel?
Yeah, thanks. I don't think it needs to be added because I don't think there's a consensus, but I would urge everybody to really consider the role of the private sector in delivery. I mean, it's the one thing that works extraordinarily well in all these countries. You can find perishable products that are delivered to pretty much the last mile. And so, you know, I think to find the right incentives would be an interesting pilot to see if we can bring them into the supply chain. Because although I think aspects of civil society, whether it's CBOs or national NGOs, will be needed for some of the last mile, particularly in times of conflict and insecurity, we're not particularly good at it. And as a former concern deputy country director for systems, I remember traveling around the field offices and seeing carcasses of motorbikes, cars, trucks, lost fuel, and actually dead donkeys once. So I think, you know, we have to really examine ourselves and say that we are the last resort for this, and what is perhaps the first resort we could use more constructively.
But does that mean, because you are saying like we should not be in charge of logistics, meaning providing transport itself, but what about the financial aspect? Should NGO finance this private transport? What do you think?
I think that would be horses for courses, depending on the context. It could be NGOs, it could be UN, it could be government, and how you do that. Concern, again, has experience of working with government with shared signatures on bank accounts in order to make payments in an open, transparent way. We can find a way to do that.
Okay, thank you. No, again, looking back at what we say about generating money from the community, from the diaspora. We will all leave the break room. Thank you for attending this session. I hope you like it, and see you all together in about 8 seconds. Thank you very much again, and thank you very, very much to the facilitator that did a terrific job, and to Lucy for not taking.
Thanks, Diane.